I'm really distracted because my cat is somewhere here purring and he sounds like a chainsaw.
It's usually my cat that's the
I know,
intruder.
what is going on? I was just like,
who are these two cat blokes?
crazy cat blokes.
I think a sign of a good bloke is a cat bloke. I think it shows a sensitivity that you should be proud of.
That's awesome.
An ability to deal with, complexity as well.
Oh my God, let me tell you. This cat, the cat never gives away anything for free. That's true.
No. Welcome, movie lovers, to That Reminds Me Of, and this episode we're talking about the devil all the time.
That's
Hi,
right.
Baron.
Hey, Doc, how are you?
I'm very well. You excited?
Oh, very excited. And in case you're just joining us, like you've never heard one of these before, this is the show where two guys, myself,
That's
Baron,
us.
and the Doc, get together, talk about films and the films that those films remind us of, thus the title. It's full of spoilers because we just like to go right from beginning to end and talk about all the stuff that happens without any, blockers. So if you haven't seen it before, check it out. Or just listen on, and if you're happy with spoilers.
That's a good intro, Baron. I think we should use that every episode.
Or some dodgy variation of it.
It's a deal.
Sweet.
So the devil all the time. I really was excited about this. Looked really cool in the Netflix queue.
Me too. I can feel
what's
you
your emotional
tiptoeing around
state?
some stuff. Some baggage. Yeah.
You can feel me tiptoeing around
I
it.
can feel you tiptoeing around it. Maybe. I don't know.
I'm just trying to give an unbiased start to the show. And,
Excellent. Good.
And we can work on what we feel like.
Good.
Felt about it later.
Awesome. Great. Well, look, I was looking forward to it too. There's a killer cast in this film.
Yep.
It's the trailer is really intriguing. And it promises a lot of period Depression era goodness. Like you get a feeling that the vibe of it from the trailer is this is going to be a well-crafted film. And
What do they call it? Something noir. I can't remember
I don't know.
I heard a couple of adjectives, sort of. You know how you have shabby chic and all
Yes.
this industrial folksy. There were two different descriptors put together to describe it. Can't remember what they were.
Interesting. I don't know what you call it either, but it's becoming, particularly on platforms like Netflix, I think, you're getting a lot more of these period piece films from around, I don't know, what are we talking about? Kind of like 30s to 50s or something, or like in those zones, there's more and more of these films popping out.
Yeah, when was this? Like, this would be later than that, wouldn't it?
I think you're probably right, actually. This is just before Vietnam. Wasn't it? So I think it does start in the early 50s and ends in the 60s somewhere. That's my feeling, because it takes place over about 10 years, I think.
Yeah, that's how perceptive I am. I didn't even really put my finger on the timeline at all.
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? This sort of film, this storyline could happen in almost any time. There's that, particularly in the place, that part of the world that it is.
Yeah.
Which is that middle America, small town vibe, really religious.
Yeah, that's right. I think you can get confused. I'm just trying to talk myself into some credibility here, but you can get confused with the small town vibe versus the olden day vibe.
I think so.
They're both sort of a bit similar, aren't they? Like a small town feels like it's stuck in the past.
Yeah, I think that's why this feels earlier than the 60s, this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So should we try to pull together a synopsis for this film?
Yes, let's start with that. And I think it's
See if
your
we can
turn.
manage.
So you have a crack and I'll save you if you stumble.
I think you might have to save me a lot this time.
Yeah, I don't know what a good savior I can be.
The film is really following a family. It starts with a father who's returned from the war at the beginning of the film to a little town that the narrator tells you is Knock'em Stiff.
Knock'em Stiff.
Knock'em
Yeah,
Stiff.
that's it.
It's such a great name for a town.
But it's a real town.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
So this guy returns from the war. He's seen atrocities. He's seen a soldier crucified, This is the Korean War, and he comes back and he's just sort of traumatized by that, but quite keen to start a family and get on with his life. And something about that crucified soldier carries through. It's almost like the theme of religion from the beginning through to the end is the strongest in this film, and it's kind of the savior of the people in some respects, but really a curse for this family, because it just seems the whole way through religion's the thread. And basically you follow the soldier who is has a child, and then slowly all the people in that link of the story die through tragedy, and the child becomes an orphan who's raised by his grandparents, and from the beginning doesn't believe in God because of all the awful things that have happened to him, but everyone around him does. And what you then get is this little sort of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels style setup with a whole bunch of characters in this town who kind of cross paths, and by the end of the film they're all going to collide and implode, but you don't know how it's going to happen. The boy makes his way through this situation with all these characters, becoming a man along the way. I think that's a really sort of not specific synopsis, but
yeah, that's a synopsis trying not to spoil, which is a good synopsis. I guess there's that central narrative, isn't there? And then, as you said, there's all these subplots that are hard to bring together. But one is the orphans. I suppose it's sort of his stepsister. It's his father's stepsister. So I suppose it's history repeating, isn't it?
It is.
They both live with the stepsister, and we follow her story. And she has a unfortunate kind of run-in with the local preacher that comes into the town. That becomes a subplot of its own. Yep. There's a whole subplot about her parents and how she came to be orphaned. And then there's this other crazy subplot where you've got this couple going around hunting for vulnerable young men to basically photograph them in sexual poses and then murder them. And all of these join up ultimately with Spider-Man as the central figure.
That's right.
That's
right.
Tom Holland.
And I think he's good in this. I actually enjoyed his performance. He played a sort of subtle variation of a hick, and I thought that was done well.
Yeah. Well, let's start with him. I thought he was great too. I thought he was a real backbone of the whole movie, and kind of had so much energy inside him, didn't he? Like you could see his face twitching with what was going on in his head. And
I don't know if I've followed all of the films that Tom Holland's made, but I know there's been a lot of sort of Marvel style action films and so on that have been in the mix, and this feels like a meaty role. Like maybe he took it as that. This is a role he could really own, that was more dramatic.
And I think he nailed it. But we've talked objectively so far.
Yeah.
What were your impressions? What was your emotional response to this film once you saw it?
Well, I'm not a guy that stops a film halfway through, generally.
Ooh, this is not going well so far.
If I commit to a film, I'm going to watch it all. And I did watch it all, don't worry. But I really wanted to turn it off halfway through and pretty much walk away. I was very close to calling you and saying, I don't know, man. I don't know, Doc. Because it just, it was such a hard watch for me. I found the whole thing to be so meandering and long and pointless in some sections that it just really, really it was tough to watch. Yeah. And I say that with I really don't want to be hard on any of the people involved in this film, because so many of them I just think are awesome, right? Just a great cast. There's a great filmmaking team behind it, but I just don't think the film has worked that well, What were your general thoughts?
Interesting.
Did you love it? I want to hear you say you loved it.
I was furious with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. I had a very similar response to you. And the length doesn't help, does it?
Oh, it's so long. It's so long, and it doesn't need to be.
I think I've diagnosed the one fatal flaw, and I don't know if you have too. Maybe we'll be on the same wavelength with this. I'm not sure. But Like, firstly, it felt like a great story that was badly told somehow.
Yes.
And we should say that it was based on a novel.
Yes. Is it the same title? I've got the author's name here. Donald Ray Pollock.
It is the same title.
Yeah.
And I think the fatal flaw in the whole film relates to the fact that it was a novel and the narration in it. I was literally livid through the whole thing.
Couldn't wait to hear you talk about that. I've got so many questions for you about narration and what your thoughts are.
Well, look, we can talk about narration in general firstly, and
yeah.
I'm when having the narration in film conversations, I'm often sticking up for narration, and I'm often in the narration's corner, saying, "Yeah, I know film. It's a different medium, and you're meant to do things, in the filmic way. But narration, if it's done right, it can really cut against what the image is doing." And I stand by that. But this is not an example. This is just the A to Z of how to do narration badly to me.
I agree, man. I totally agree. It really, really bothered me, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I'm the same as you with most of this argument, that I think narration, like anything, if you do it well, is great. And some people love, particularly film students, I think, I don't know if this
love
continues
canning
on.
it.
They love to can it. And I don't know if this continues on to like when, if you're in Hollywood, you're working with the top of the game people, but they just love to can it. And yet there's so many great examples of how of when it's worked. And when you get great narration, it's awesome. It adds so much to the film. Yeah. So there's no rule.
No, there's no rule. And it annoys me when people bag it just out of hand. My response to it was early on, I thought, I'm always on my guard when I hear it open with narration, and I'm always super tuned in to seeing, okay, are they going to do it well or not? I wasn't enjoying it, but I thought, okay, if we just get over this first act hurdle, when they're the historical type stuff, and if they stop it then, and it was like contained to that storybook sort of start, I thought, okay, I could live with that. But when it continued into act 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7,
yes,
I was just dismayed.
Tom had never eaten a peach so great. It reminded him of the summers of his youth.
Son. It's so true. There were times when it foreshadowed what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And there were times when something happened and then it would just explain it. And
no.
I remember there was a scene where you're looking at Robert Pattinson's character and him doing all these evil things, and we can come to him later. And it's pretty clear that someone's watching him. It's pretty clear that it's Tom Holland.
Yes.
And well, actually, this wasn't a problem with the narration. This goes beyond the narration and just to the fact that it has to explain itself several times. Because then in the dialogue, Tom Holland says something like, I've been watching you for 2 weeks. And I thought, no, you don't. We
don't
know.
Need to say that.
We know you have been.
Because this filmmaker, Antonio Campos, doesn't really strike me as and I haven't seen any of the other films, but I've heard things about them, and he doesn't strike me as that kind of filmmaker.
Maybe for the Netflix audience. So this is a Netflix film. It doesn't have to be, but it wants to reach a large audience, and it deals with dark themes.
Yes.
So it's supposedly making it easier.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't make it easier. It wore me down. It it made me tired with the emotional energy of being mad at it for not respecting me enough to understand what they're trying to say.
And one of the things about Netflix, this is one of the appeals, other than they're making a lot of films and they've got a lot of money, but you don't have studio executives breathing down your neck, right? You can go and the thought is, or the word is, that you can go get your, reasonable budget. It's not huge, but you have a lot of freedom that comes with it. That's generally the thing you hear about Netflix. And it feels like the filmmakers were trying to please executives that weren't even there, That's what
I was going to say. I don't think they're trying to please the executives. I think they probably did have freedom, and I think it's the author of the novel perhaps, and the trying to stay true to the novel that maybe has done it. That's just my guess, because he voiced it as well.
Right.
And
a little too close to the project, maybe.
And you can imagine if you've written a novel that you're proud of. I haven't read it, but I can imagine how it would be a good read, because it's not a bad story.
That's right. You get that sense, don't you? That actually there's a lot that's in the novel that they've sort of tried and failed at getting across through the film.
Exactly. But if you're too close and you think that the story exists in the words and in the words only, then I can see how that mistake would be made.
It felt to me like this novel, what you're actually reading is the inner worlds of each of these characters. So if you're going to read this novel, you're going to jump over to, the psycho serial killer couple, and you're going to be in the woman's mind, and she's under the thumb of this crazy dude. And while they're committing all these murders, you're hearing her thoughts on like how she's going to escape, and how much, but she kind of loves the guy, but she doesn't, all that sort of stuff that would be amazing. It'd be such a great read. And none of it comes through in the film. And I think they tried to get some of it across through narration rather than through just good character stuff. And the reason that you don't get all the good dialogue and the good character stuff is because there's too many stories going on. There's sort of 7 different threads and not enough time spent on each to be able to actually dig into any of them.
Well, I'd tentatively challenge that a little, because I think that the narration problem is such a big one that if you simply cut out the narration, I think you'd improve the film right there. And that, I, for one, would not have been as frustrated with it if it was just a straight cut of that audio track.
That would be a great start. That's a minimum. I think you could easily do that, and you could probably cut a good 20 minutes out of the film. And
oh, hell yeah. Cut some out.
And you'd probably straight away, performances and the amount of time spent on characters aside, you'd straight away have a much better film. But I just had a really strong feeling that part of the issue of this was that we were jumping back and forth, and it's that kind of multi-protagonist stories. I forgot what they call them, but to write one of those is really tricky. To give each character enough time to actually to lift off the page and become real is really tricky. And I don't think that they succeeded in that. I don't think they got that right.
Yeah, I agree, but not as strongly. What frustrated me was that there were several parts of the films and performances and ideas that I actually bought into and I thought were well done.
Yeah.
And it was just so frustrating that I saw them undone at every turn.
Yeah. What did you like? What were the bits that stuck out to you, if you can name a few?
Performance-wise, I think there's some great performances. So Tom Holland is one.
Yeah.
But even more so, Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah, I agree.
Really, really enjoy watching him. I think that first section of the film, he was captivating, and his character I thought was complex. The relationship with
Charlotte, I think, but I can't remember the actor's name. She was great.
She was really good. Their relationship was authentic and wonderful, and that played off his, angry, violent faith really well. Yeah. And even how that section ended with the abruptness of all that violence when we've known him as being a pretty good man. Yes. And then he does all these inexplicable things. It all happens suddenly, and you really see it from the perspective of the Tom Holland character. And I think that whole part of it did the heavy lifting really for his character, because as you're watching him for the rest of the film, you really have a sense of what his background is.
Yes. I think that was actually the strongest and most taut storyline in there was the father's storyline. Yeah. Right from the war through to having a kid and a wife and trying to provide a living for them, through to her dying from cancer and then him turning back to God, and all of that. I think that whole storyline was wonderful. It was after that I had a real issue with it.
Yeah, and yet that's when the film started.
Yeah. Yes.
It noticeably began when Tom Holland arrived.
That's true.
And we'd gone 45 minutes or something. So
I think that's the scariest thing, right? If you have a book that you love and you want to adapt it, I just think it would be terrifying, that sort of possibility that you might fuck it up. There's this thing you love and you just turn it into a film that's not great. And that's the thing about this film is like, it wasn't bad, but it felt very mediocre. And because of that, mediocre is such an awful word, but like, because of that, that kind of, it is mediocrity. It's just sort of the middle of the road. It's playing it super safe. There's just nothing great to take away from it. You have to really look, like you have to go, oh, that performance, that's a great performance. You know, that was shot okay, but that little sequence there was great. You know, like that's kind of what you have to do if you want to be fair to the effort that goes into a film, but just like, it's going to be forgotten by people. It's just not a standout.
Can you point to anything you liked?
Yes, things that I liked. We've already talked about that first act. I thought that was the best part of the story in terms of just from beginning to end storytelling of one arc.
Yep.
The casting choices were really great, but just sort of underused. Like they weren't really used to their full potential. Beyond that, I don't have a lot that's overly positive. Like there are things that I think worked, but I don't know if that's enough, you know? I haven't read any reviews that are just like, I love this film. And the thing is like, there's so many great films coming out now. There always are, but just there's a lot of good Netflix and other streaming content that's happening, that there's a lot of, I feel like that gap in the middle, it feels quite wide at the moment. Like there's just a lot that's just like middle of the road and not that fantastic.
This threatened to be one of the good ones. I think that's, perhaps we're judging it harshly because it,
totally.
It felt like it was part of this, the new age of wonderful television or Netflix movies. It's
harder to talk about a film that doesn't gel than it is to talk about anything else. Like when it's just sort of not, none of it's really worked great, but you can't really pinpoint any of it as being awful. That's the hardest, to cover.
Well, you want to try and pinpoint things that are awful. Like we've said, narration. I think we both fundamentally agree on that. Was there anything else that really irked you?
I really, so one of the films we've talked about is The Lighthouse. Robert Pattinson was in that, and he delivered a great performance.
Yep, let's talk about him.
I was so bothered by his performance in this film. Like everything that he brought to The Lighthouse that was great, all the character work that he brought to it, this felt like he was trying to bring a new character, but the development wasn't there. Like it was just felt really thin, and it didn't work at all for me. Like the accent, just all of the nuance of the character, it felt really off.
Well, the tragedy is that I think really off is what they were going for in a way.
Yeah.
But it was just, there was no subtlety to it at all, other than from the very start when you're not quite sure which way he's going to go with the chicken livers.
Yes,
you're not sure if he's going to say they're the best or the worst.
That was a good little scene. I liked that one. I thought that was
because
the idea was great.
Bloody ambiguity, and you had to think and wonder. But then once they gave it away, he was just completely evil, creepy, like nothing to think about. Like he's just, and I don't think, I wasn't thrilled with his performance either, but I don't think he had much subtlety to work with anyway, so I wouldn't put it all down to him.
And you know what? Probably anything that he brought to the table and said, hey, I think we can do this. I have a feeling that he might have been turned down.
No, you'll be right, mate. No,
just keep
do it this way. Follow the script.
We're going for a certain subtlety here, which is also code for bland and boring sometimes, Anyway.
What did you make of the subplot with the crazy killer couple?
I was intrigued to see where that was going to go early on. I thought we've seen that sort of Bonnie and Clyde thing before, or was it called Natural Born Killers? That sort of vibe. But this, it felt like they were just trying to do the Bonnie and Clyde thing. Like there wasn't a lot of extra attention or nuance brought to it. And I thought both characters were well played. Like the acting was good, but that kind of inevitable thing that Tom Holland's character was going to end up in the car with them was just so obvious, and it irritated the hell out of me when it happened.
Yeah, it just that was a problem for a lot of things, wasn't it? Just too obvious, no place for wonder or anxiety about what's going to happen, because and just wondering how they're going to do it.
Also, what an opportunity for and just like that, they basically got Tom Holland's character in the car, and then he sees the gun in the back of the pants, and he gets himself ready and shoots him, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, they could have so easily gotten a fully tense, crazy scene of like them on a towel together, posing naked with a gun to his head. Like, they could have gone so many more interesting ways, and it just like none of that played out. It was just the most bland, obvious way of sort of finishing that little sequence off.
That's so true. But in just to balance the ledger a little bit, with one of the other little storylines that they had with the preacher, the crazy preacher that has the spiders on his,
that guy,
jar of spiders on his head, and he really looks like a creepy dude.
What an actor! He's great as well.
He's great. And well, firstly, I was really frustrated with the obviousness of him killing his wife.
Yeah.
So that was another one that was just too obvious. They could have given you a little bit of suspense, but they didn't. However, from the moment he kills the wife and then starts saying, resurrect her, I quite liked that. I didn't expect that. I liked that too. Yeah. And that was the start of the redemption of him. And that continued in the scene with the crazy couple. I thought the scene with them and him was quite well done. I agree. He being this creep, and he's being told to basically, go and have fun with the guy's wife, and he sticks to his guns, and I think it's a real redeeming moment. And it played against what you thought might happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. There were tons of moments like that through the film, and yet I think they get lost in all the others.
In all the minutes of the film.
Exactly, all the minutes and all the other moments that don't hit it with you, that you just, and of course those are the things you're going to come away with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame.
You mentioned casting before. Did you have any other casting choices or performances that you particularly
I think you've nailed the top one. Jason Clarke, who's the serial killer husband or boyfriend, is the other great actor from that group, and I think he did a good job. He did a fine job, but he didn't have a great character to work with, or there was some element missing there, but he did a fine job of it.
Motivation, maybe
motivation. Yeah, exactly.
For being such a creep, we want to at least have some sense.
That's right. I thought the young Arvin Russell is the main character. I thought the young boy who played him did a good job as well. He was convincing. I keep coming back to this idea that like what we're missing from this is that this book worked because you had a real sense of who these people were, their inner voices, and their place in the world in this creepy little town in the middle of nowhere. And that's what would have made the book great. And of course, none of that comes through in the film. Yeah. And there's nothing an actor can do about that if it's not there on the page and it hasn't been talked about, beforehand. There's only so much they can do.
I've always thought that a great book makes a bad movie, and a bad book makes a great movie.
Wow. Yeah, wow. I have to think about that one a bit.
Because all the juice in a book is in the subtext and the interior stuff, the psychological stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a movie, it's usually plot driven, and a plot driven book bores me. Maybe too deep for this time of night.
It's too deep. But we should get on to some remind me ofs, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to get started?
Yeah, so I've got one right in front of me. I read this recently. Cormac McCarthy, Child of God. I think I've mentioned it once before, but the sort of desperate poverty and that kind of the bad things that happen in little towns in the middle of nowhere that are going through, that kind of poverty. That's what this book is. Like, it's just all the depraved things that can happen in a town, and there's seemingly the thread is just not even there almost. Like, there's one character that you come back to every now and again, and you're slowly sort of tracing his line to the end. However, it takes the most meandering little way there, stopping by a farmer over here and what he's doing with his family, and then just jumping down to the cops, and it does that. And that's exactly what this film felt like, Yeah. It felt like it had come from a similar source, something similar to this.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that one when we were talking about The Road. Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't intended to talk about this one, but a book for me was Flannery O'Connor, the author, who wrote a book called Wise Blood, and that felt very similar too. In the same way, it's kind of a lot of weird hick sort of characters and a real sense of religion gone wrong, within the storyline. So people doing bad things due to a perverted version of religion.
Perfect. I was trying to think of a film that had this same sort of theme of a curse of religion going through it, and I could not think of any. I was curious to see if you had any that came to mind. But yeah, that's sort of what I was searching for, because that to me feels like the really strong theme in this film.
Yeah, it's religion gone wrong. I know I've just had one, but let me have another one while we're on the topic.
Yeah.
You were looking for perhaps an older film. I think I found what you're looking for, but in a current Netflix series.
Ooh.
And that's Raised by Wolves.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, so we won't spoil that one, but
yeah,
that's
great.
One of the themes of that is religion versus atheism, and the things that are done in the name of religion can be pretty awful.
I mean, I love this theme. This is a theme that I really care about, because I think it's the cause of so many of the world's woes, right? And we need more films that are exploring it. I wish they had done a better job of maybe making it feel more driven by the minds and hearts of men, than as opposed to just sort of random acts of God. Like, this whole film just feels like religion is a curse, and it's fallen upon this family in this town, and anything could happen. You could be picked up by some serial killers on the side of the road, or you could have a priest that's just raping all the young girls in town. But like, there's no like cause and effect to that. It just feels like, oh, you're praying to God, okay, these things will now happen to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's even a moment in the film where the father, the senior, he basically
the Skarsgård father.
Yeah, Skarsgård. So the father of the main character, he writes a postcard home saying, "I've decided to start praying again." And like, it seems like the next day his wife has cancer, and
that's true.
And then their lives just completely go down the drain.
It's not a very subtle comment about religion, is it?
No, and not very sort of like, it's not really founded in anything. Like, there's no feeling that because the people of the town are crazy, that's why these things are happening. Or because there's two factions and they both disagree with each other, that's why these things are happening. It's just like, well, these things are happening now because you're praying to God. That's like literally all I could take away from most of it,
Yeah.
Because the acts are so random.
Have I done 2 in a row?
Yeah, yes, you have. Sorry.
Well, no, hang on. I want to do 3 in a row now.
Do 3 in a row.
While we're on the topic.
Yes.
I just keep off the cuff ones. Corpus Christi, that we watched as part of the film festival. I hope you weren't going to say this. It's just on the same theme, so I thought,
no,
let's throw it in there. the story of a priest, or an imposter priest, I suppose, coming into a small town, and the theme of religion and how that can be, not necessarily always a good thing, but that was an example of it done well. Yeah,
really well. Yes, because everything feels motivated, and it's actually all motivated around human little, like the politics in the town and the interrelations that are going on there, and it's got nothing to do with God in a way. Whereas
right.
this is the other way around.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect point. It's about the complexity of that preacher, that priest in that case.
Yes.
You can really feel the human struggle inside him. In this film, there's no struggle. He's just, a caricature.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a shame. We've got such great actors.
Although in fairness, the other preacher is a little bit sort of tortured and hard to pin down.
He is. Yeah, and he's probably one of the more interesting characters. I think I've already mentioned Babel. Did I mention Babel or Crash? No. I can't remember. One of those. Or Lockstock. But that sort of...
You've just given me three again. You're trying to catch up.
Whichever one it was that I mentioned, those are the other two. So I've got Crash, Babel, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels as like just references for those multi-protagonist stories where all the paths cross, but somehow by the end they've all been neatly tied up in a bow. But all three of those films are better than this one by a long way. It's crazy. I was trying to so I had that in mind, and I was thinking if you had took that plus a sort of a curse of religion or a religion gone wrong film, what do you have? And it's this. I don't think there are any others that I can think of. So I kind of got stuck there. The other one I had sort of in the back of my mind was Brokeback Mountain. And it was for no other reason than I think we had this sense of a small town stuck in time. And these were the things that happens to people in that town at that time.
I think you've mentioned Brokeback Mountain before. I can't remember which.
I can't remember either.
For. I've heard it.
I love Brokeback Mountain, and I love Ang Lee. I just think Ang Lee is the best.
Yeah,
so
true.
He's great.
That was a great film, really, wasn't it? So like obviously the subject matter was out there at the time. I remember it. Yeah. But just the way it was presented was really really novel.
What a masterful filmmaker. I just wish we saw more from him.
I can't think of his whole catalogue, but I can think of a few goodies.
Well, he's also done things like he's gone from films like Brokeback Mountain through to there's Crouching Tiger in there, and there's The Life of Pi, which is just almost the opposite of Brokeback Mountain in terms of the filmmaking. I haven't seen The Life of Pi. Yeah, it's just this visual extravaganza. Any other remind me ofs for you?
A quick shout out to the Coen brothers. I think this is somewhere between a bad version of "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" and a bad version of "No Country for Old Men."
Yes. Yes, that's what it is. Yes, no, that's good. I like that. Yeah, both of those are great.
The former, when the first preacher came in and they started doing the dance, the music number in the church. That's when I first thought, this is Coen Brothers gone wrong.
I love it. You know what it reminded me of a little bit as well was There Will Be Blood. That kind of small town, crazy, almost fanatical Christian religious preacher stuff,
I can't think of it. I'm sure I've seen that.
That's the Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Thomas Anderson film. It's the one with the I will drink your milkshake line which everyone does memes of.
Maybe I haven't seen it. Okay, on the list.
On the list. Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. But then again, when you put PTA and his character work up against any other film almost, it's that's a crazy comparison.
Let alone this one.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing I thought of a little bit was Thelma and Louise. I just had this sense of also a much better film than a lot of other films, really. But just this sense of this impending doom and this drive towards that, and all the things that happen along the way are just more crap that's sort of heaped on the way to like the end, which is you know is not going to be good.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. You know where he's going, and it's like it's fate, and he just can't stop moving in that direction. And there's sort of visual parallels somehow in the couple in the car sort of driving around as well.
Yeah.
Not thematically, but I think there's something about them as well that is kind of that they are going to get caught. They're leaving. He's got a dark room in his house with all the pictures that are evidence, and she drops a picture on the floor, and her creepy cop brother,
Yes.
picks it up. So there is something inevitable about them getting caught as well.
Yeah, that's right. And there might even be a clue in the narration right at the start. I can't even remember. But
clue?
It feels like
there's no clues in the narration. There's only answers.
Well, that's true. It felt like the kind of film where the narrator might have said, you know, here's Bob and Holly, and in 10 years they're going to be dead.
Yeah,
or whatever, you know. It just says right up front.
Yeah, that's a risky maneuver when they do that.
Yeah, that's all I got. You got anything else?
I'll finish it with one anti-reference.
Ooh, an anti-reference. We love an anti-reference.
I think that's probably will mark the end of it. And it's the film we talked about last week, Thinking of Ending Things. And I want to end where we began on this one, talking about the narration. Thinking of Ending Things is the perfect example to me of narration just done perfectly.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the film also started with narration, but it completely it provided another level of meaning. It cut against what was happening in the film. It made you think one thing when the other thing was true. You know, that was just beautiful, and that's why I'm always in narration's corner, and I feel narration's let me down this time.
Absolutely. Hey, that's a beautiful way to end this, and I think you're right. Like, it's not about the rule of never do narration, but just you got to treat it respectfully, like all the elements in the film. You have to really think about it if you're going to use it. I love that as a final thought, because I think that is one of the big problems of this film. And we've got Enola Holmes next week. Might as well just say it because I know it's out on Netflix today.
Yes.
So we're gonna do that next.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. I've seen the trailer. It looks pretty cool. I can't quite tell. It could go either way, but so could anything.
Absolutely. And it's another one that I can watch with my daughters, which is fun because we've only had a couple of those so far.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, until Enola Holmes, I'll see you later.
See you next time, Doc.